Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my great pleasure to introduce the Honorable Byron W. Brown. He is the mayor of the city of Buffalo to testify before the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Trade. Mayor Brown is in his fourth term as mayor of New York's second largest city. Under his leadership, the city has made tremendous progress toward reversing the decline caused by bad trade policies over the past half century. Today, Buffalo is experiencing a renaissance, and the city is growing once more in population, in jobs, and in opportunity. Mayor Brown is leading Buffalo's rebirth. He knows the value of infrastructure and how it impacts our communities and affects our quality of life. I welcome him here today, and I look forward to hearing his testimony.
Chairman Blumenauer, Ranking Member Buchanan, members of the subcommittee, it's an honor to be with you today. Congressman Higgins, thank you for your partnership and your generous introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Trade regarding the lack of federal infrastructure funding and how it has hurt the competitiveness of cities. I'd like to open by expressing my support for President Biden's American Jobs Plan because it restores the traditional partnership between the federal government and local municipalities on infrastructure funding, which used to provide working class families the opportunity to have a good home in a stable neighborhood and allowed communities to sustain a healthy pace of development. Since the 1960s, Buffalo's tax base, like that of other manufacturing cities, changed rapidly. Suburban development drew a greater number of middle-class homeowners away, and cities were deprived of the solid economic base they relied on to fund services, maintain property values, and attract employers. As a result, our infrastructure deteriorated with the relatively little funding available going mostly to maintenance and repairs. Meanwhile, the costs of even this work, which continues to accelerate, are being borne by the residents who can least afford it. The key to ending this cycle and restoring a sense of equity to our infrastructure funding is having a re-engaged federal partner. Buffalo's economy, because of our proximity to the Canadian border and Toronto, is heavily dependent on foreign trade and tourism. Canada is New York State's #1 export market, with over $19 billion in goods and services crossing into Canada annually. New technologies, new services, and new modes of transportation are emerging at a rapid pace. We must have an infrastructure that will be able to meet the demands that trade in the 21st century will require. That means that our infrastructure must be capable of supporting the autonomous electric vehicles that are becoming a greater segment of the transportation industry. These low or no carbon vehicles will rely on the presence of sensors, communications devices, and a charging infrastructure, which we should lay the foundation for now. Trade will also take on an increasingly digital aspect, with the information being shared between universities, financial institutions, and biomedical researchers being just as important as the goods which move across our border. To do this, our information infrastructure must have greater capacity, be more secure, and provide greater accessibility to every resident. That last component is critical to ending some of the racial, economic, and wealth disparities that have left too many Black and brown children without internet access during the pandemic, while other children who lived just a half mile or less away had excellent connections. The ability to move goods and people by rail must also be improved if cities are to remain competitive. This will mean dedicated lines for high-speed rail between metro areas like Buffalo and Toronto, as well as greater commercial rail capacity so that our reliance on other carbon-producing modes of transit shrinks. Through the right kind of infrastructure funding, the kind outlined in the American Jobs Plan, which advances our concept of infrastructure beyond just the roads and bridges built in the last century, we have an opportunity to grow our economy in an equitable and inclusive way. When we think of infrastructure as an investment in our water and sewer systems, so our children grow up in healthy homes, in our civic infrastructure, so that cultural institutions become public spaces that help heal racial and social divides through art and dialogue, in our digital infrastructure, so that every resident can fully participate in the economic, social, and educational life of our nation, and in our human infrastructure, so that the people who are the ultimate users of these systems are leading healthy, safe, and productive lives, then we can envision a more prosperous America that benefits every resident. Again, thank you all very much for giving me the opportunity to testify before you today.